A very good afternoon to you from the sports desk. Let's start here. Dubai has hosted this weekend's opening leg of the World Rugby Sevens Series. Now, this continues in the Middle East rise in terms of staging big sporting events. South Africa have had an interesting outing on both the men and women's side. Former South African women's sevens national team coach Paul Delport joins us now to talk about the season opening round. Paul, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I absolutely love chatting sevens.
And I think maybe it's a bit unfair of us to say former women's Springboks. We should say for current Thailand women's sevens coach. Congratulations on that one.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much. It was a very brief surgery on that side. So I'm actually back in the country now. But it was a really good experience getting to coach them at the Challenger Series early on this year, and just seeing how they do things differently in Thailand was a wonderful experience.
Let's talk about that aspect, Paul. I mean, you're one person who has been very open and very strong on the issue of development, and one thing that the TRU has spoken about is to try and develop a women's sevens team that is strong enough to compete in the Olympics. Just tell us about that spell and you know, what was it like?
Yeah, I think they definitely have the right idea and their hearts are in the right place. I just think, you know, when you're looking at most tier 2 and tier 3 nations, they just struggle with resourcing. And I think the hardest thing is, and it actually happened to us and I say us in South Africa with the women's program, is we have this top-down approach where you have your contracted group or your top most talented players who kind of have to carry you through a season or a tournament, and that model just doesn't work. You know, you look at the best sporting codes in the world, their strength is always in their academy programs. You know, I'm not a Man United fan, but I look at this kid who's now come through. His name escapes me, but this 18-year-old kid who's come through the academy, who scores possibly the best goal we've ever seen. That's possibly the best goal we've ever seen, and that just shows you what a good academy system does. So yeah, so I think Thailand's heart's definitely in the right place, but they really struggle. There's no rugby in schools. You know, I liken their situation with the women a lot to the situation for young girls and women in South Africa. There just aren't enough opportunities to actually play at a good level and then be able to move to that next level.
I think the kid you're talking about is Garnacho at Man United. Just for the record, I'm not a Man United fan either, so we're cool on that note. Let's talk about that. I mean, I know that in between your spell, when you left the South African side and then also joined the Thailand side, you were involved in development. Just tell us about that personally. Why is it important for you to get involved in developing players and just planting that seed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, possibly we, you know, especially when you know, I say young men come out of school and they go into the big bad world. I think there's possibly a step missing at the moment. You know, the top guys will always make it because they come from the very top schools where they're trying to implement high performance systems. I think where the ladies struggle is that they don't come from any of those systems. You know, you just look at and I say from a purely rugby perspective, you look at the boys. You know, you look at Paul Jim against Paul boys. That's basically an international game, whereas our girls never get to play at that level. And I think that's where my love for development came. Is that you know what a lot of the folk in men's rugby don't understand is we are taking crossover athletes in the women's game and we're trying to get them up to international level within 6 months to a year. Whereas you look at men or boys, by the time they're playing international rugby, they've been playing rugby for 12, 13 years. And I think that's why the development aspect is very important for me. I think having played also, I don't think the personal aspect was looked at enough, and I'm just talking about the holistic approach. You know, it was always about winning and doing well, and I think towards the end of my career, the more holistic approach was taken because, you know, the players, they're people before they're rugby players, and I think having that having that balance and having that understanding that rugby is important, but it also teaches you lessons for life. So I think that's the roundabout way of me explaining why I'm so hell-bent on the development. And again, in terms of the strength of your program, it doesn't matter men's or women's. If you don't have top young talent who are hungry coming through, then you're never going to drive your system. You're never going to drive your program. You're not going to put the incumbent players under pressure and ensure that they're improving as well. So that's why the development aspect is so important.
Would you then say, Paul, that it's simply lack of interest? And the reason I'm saying this is that if you look at the men's rugby, I mean, we're world champs. We're dominating. We're arguably the best at the moment in the world, you know, in any form that you can speak about. But then it means that the systems are there, but only in the men's side. Could that be it, that there is more focus on men's rugby than women's rugby, and that's why the disconnect that we see?
Yeah, I think that's you make a very good point. I will say though, over the past few years, there has been a massive effort being made worldwide and also in South Africa to bridge that gap. I think the ladies are given far more opportunities, but I also believe that in this country we've never quite understood what that initial capital outlay is to develop women's rugby. You know, in the men's game we're very lucky, because our schooling systems are absolutely incredible. I mean, you look at the coaching and that the boys get. You look at the level that the boys get to play at every weekend. You look at the tournaments available for young men, you know, and the level that it's at. I think that's elite level, pushing towards high performance. Whereas the women's game has always been geared to mass participation, and then there's that big missing step left. You know, there's nothing in women's rugby in South Africa is high performance. And I think that's a level we're working to. I definitely think there's elite level, and I think the people involved at the top, you look at Renfred and Sissel and someone like Dr. Michelle van Rooyen, they are super smart and they're brilliant rugby people. So you have enough good people up there that understand what needs to be done. I just don't know if they're going to be afforded or given everything that they need for us to perform. I mean, you look at the girls' performance over this weekend in Dubai. I think it's been phenomenal. You know, the last time we played on the World Series was 2015, and to go out and play against New Zealand in that first game and only lose by 5 points, I stand to be corrected, but I think that first game was 19-14. You know, and just how competitive they were against Fiji as well, and then also, you know, beating Spain today. Brilliant. You know, they came in ranked 12th. I think they finished 10th. And I think it's a really good way to start their first season back on the World Series.
And I guess this level of competition is exactly what they need, Paul, is to say that the only way to improve your game is to match yourself against the best in the world, and that's exactly the platform that they have at the moment.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I've always been a big proponent of saying you improve as a player by playing with better players, and then also you improve as a player, or as an individual, and as a team and as a management when you play against better teams. And I think that was always a frustration for me when I was coaching the national team. Is, you know, in Africa we're so isolated. I mean, and there are quite a few reasons for that. I mean, obviously our currency is also quite tough, you know, and you know, if you want to go and play in Europe or in Australasia or in America or Canada, it's very, very expensive. But you know, rugby in Africa is not at any decent standard yet. So that's what we always struggled with. You know, we never got that real competition where we could really improve, that real competition week in and week out that the ladies will now get on the World Series. So I think they'll keep improving in leaps and bounds, and I think they'll definitely end in the top 8 before the end of this year. I feel that they're a better team than Spain, Brazil, Great Britain and Japan at the moment.
You know, Paul, one other issue when you look at women's sport in general in South Africa, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people raise is the issue of funding. That, you know, corporate South Africa will be very quick to sponsor a Bafana Bafana, a Springboks team, you know, a men's hockey team and so on. But when it comes to women's sports, there is always that thing. Is it one of the things that you picked up that even as much as we look at, the mother bodies of the sporting codes and the role that they play, but corporate South Africa also is not coming on board in terms of helping out in women's sports?
Yeah, I think I've got quite a funny answer to that. Remember Trevor Noah in one of his stand-up comedies said, South Africans, the world goes to the right, and then we first go short left, check it out, see what's going on, and then we catch up with the rest of the world. And I think we really missed a beat. I look at the top countries in the world. They started investing properly in women's sport 10 years ago. We still haven't done it properly. And again, there are lots of factors behind that. I mean, let's be honest. Look at the position our country's in. We don't have extra resources. We don't have money. Our country is really, really struggling at the moment. It was part of my role when I was coaching the women's team was to try and go out and get sponsorships. And I think in the women's game, it's not taken as seriously as the men. And I think I also understood a lot of people's perspective on that is because the product that's delivered is possibly not as exciting as the men's product is yet. And then my argument was, it's only going to get exciting if you invest in it and if you give it time. So I think, there are lots of factors. But I think one of the reasons why I left SA Rugby was it's pretty simple to me. I don't know if you'll agree with me is you either want to do something or you don't. So if you want to do it and you want to make it better, then you invest and you do what needs to be done because the models are out there. England's done it, New Zealand's done it, France have done it, the USA and Canada have done it, Australia's done it. The model's out there, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to do what they've done. But yeah, there's still a lack of willingness to do it, and I don't quite know when that's going to change.
And I mean, which is you sort of touched on my next point is to that. Are you hopeful? I mean, having been within the system. And seeing where we are now, are you hopeful that things will change? Is there at least an inkling of hope to say, we can improve the system?
Yes, absolutely. I feel it's always, and this is professional sports, and I'm sure you'll agree with me 100%, is that it's about the product. It's about, we are now competing with Netflix and, Disney and Showmax and all these different sporting codes because there's just so much on offer at the moment. So what is rugby doing? And I think 15s and 7s as a whole, what is rugby doing firstly to bring new people to the sport, and what is the women's game doing to bring new people to the sport? I feel it's an untapped market. There is just so much there's so much growth still to happen in the women's game. So I definitely do feel that, and I also feel just you look at our current team and the performance over the weekend. We have some true world class players, and I think that that brand of rugby that we're playing, which is very exciting and has been quite clinical over the weekend, will draw more. I think more support, and it will give the ladies more exposure. And as you touched on earlier, that's essentially all we need. The more exposure and good publicity we get, the more sponsors we can get, the more interest we can garner, and I think the faster the program will grow.
What do you make of the men's sevens team? I mean, they obviously have performed a little better in comparison to the women's. They've played at bigger tournaments and so on, have played at the highest level, been to finals, won tournaments. What do you make of where they are? And I guess it also still comes with this pressure of the Springboks 15 winning the World Cup, this expectation that South African Rugby World Cup in its entirety are world beaters.
Yes, you're right. I mean, I think if you're playing with a Springbok on your chest, there's always that bit of pressure. But I think Sandile and Philip have done a fantastic job. I think it really cut them deep. Losing to Kenya at the African champs where we didn't qualify for the Olympics. So for the guys to hit the ground running the way they did this weekend, it's just testament to their character. That's what sevens teaches you. It's so competitive at the moment. Years ago when I was playing, there were maybe 4 or 6 teams that could win a tournament. Now there are 10 teams that can win a tournament. So you really need to be consistent. You really need to understand your role. You need to, really be spot on when you pick your team. You need to get that balance right. And the guys have done it very well this weekend. They've brought a couple of youngsters in, and added it to that melee of the talented guy, the talented older, more experienced guys who have come back and have performed very well. I think of Justin Geduld and Zane Davids and Salvin, and Salvin Davids, who was out for the whole of last season. He's been instrumental in this cup, in making the cup final. Sorry, I see it's starting in the background here.
Yeah.
I think the guys will keep growing. Remember also after the Neil Powell era, Neil was fantastic. He was a great manager, great coach. And, it's always going to take time when a new coaching staff, takes over. We lost a couple of our stalwarts and we've had to develop again and kind of, start afresh and anew. And it's always going to take time. So I think the guys are hitting their straps. They're coming into their own. They've kind of spent a year together, and yeah, they'll definitely keep on growing throughout the season.
And what do you make of the crossover that we normally see from the sevens players going to the 15s? And how does that work? And do you think that it enhances, our style of play, especially when you move from sevens to the 15s?
Yes, absolutely. I must pay Jacques and Rassie a compliment. The Springboks are really playing a more exciting, expansive kind of blend of rugby. We can still, really mix and match it physically with the best in the world. But I think bringing in guys like Kwagga and Kirtley and Cheslin. Obviously I'm biased, but Kwagga and Cheslin are my favorite players in the world. But I truly believe, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the 15s realm didn't see the value of sevens players, whereas I think that's changed massively. I just look at the conditioning, the skill set that sevens players bring. I always say, with my coaching hats on, I always say, if you want to become a better rugby player, go and play sevens. It will add to your skill set. It makes you understand, what one-on-one battles are, and it just, you kind of really are under pressure for every minute of the game, be it on attack or defense. I would like to see more guys making that crossover, and obviously 15s teams showing a bit more faith in the sevens players, because sevens players can slot right in. I think it's far more difficult for 15s players to slot into the sevens program because it's just a different skill set, and the guys they're not as conditioned. And again, I'm generalizing. Someone like Jesse Creel would be able to step in no problem, because the guys, he's always in good shape. He's always fit. But generally, I think, sevens players, always can make that crossover very, very easily and add a lot of value to 15s programs.
Let's end the conversation, Paul, with the issue of coaching. We've had the era of Paul True, we've had the era of Neil Powell, and the current era. And then these are different eras that we've seen in rugby, the development that we're seeing. But do we have the coaches that are able to be world beaters? In all their ways, from Paul to Neil, they've had their different styles and achievements that they've had in the world stage. But do you feel that we've got, and the reason I'm asking this briefly is that, many are saying that, well, Rassie is still in the 15s, the main guy, whether you have Ninaba or not, you have this consistency. So in the sevens, do you feel that we have enough talent in terms of coaching?
Yes, absolutely. I think Sandile and Philip, who have taken over now, are absolutely brilliant. They're smart guys. They understand the game well. They've also been in the program for years and years. I look at Renfred, who's gone back to the women now. He was the women's coach prior to me taking over, and then he joined Neil as Neil's assistant for years. And I think Paul True is an absolute genius. He put so many good systems in place. And then Neil followed that up with his flavor as well. He's an absolutely brilliant coach. You look at his record. He was so innovative. He brought some really sterling players in. So I really think the sevens program's in good hands. I think the only thing that might bite us in the backside going forward is that there's no sevens culture in South Africa. So the only guys that can coach sevens are those of us that came through the sevens system. and those of us that showed a bit of interest in coaching. So you look at Sissel Africa now, who's joined Renfred as his assistant. I don't think you get a better sevens brain than Sissel, so it's fantastic for him to have joined the program. But those are the guys that you're going to see coming through, and I think it's quite tough if you're on the outside, because there are no opportunities being created for guys who are outside the program, just because we don't have a sevens culture in this country. So I think that might be something that we're going to struggle with going forward if other nations are going to start offering our brilliant coaches deals that they can't say no to. I think we might struggle with that going forward. So we're going to have to create an environment where our top guys who are currently in their positions want to stay and want to take the program forward, and then we're going to have to take a look at our coaching development structures, because the games are very, very different. You can't take a 15s guy and throw him into a sevens coaching position and think he's going to do well from the outset.
Any coaching jobs in the pipeline for Paul Delport?
A couple of options in Europe for next year, but I think just maybe on a contract basis. I'm quite keen to get into the 15s game as well, not as a head coach, but just to learn. I think sevens has been a magical platform. And as we discussed, there are no opportunities here for international coaches unless you're coaching the Blitzboks men or women. So it's unfortunate, but we're going to have to look overseas, and then really looking to see if there's something out there, as a skills coach, breakdown coach, micro skills coach, attack coach, in the 15s game.
All right, Paul, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for taking time to speak to us. I appreciate your time. That's
thanks so much.
Paul Delport, who is the former women's sevens Springbok coach, just talking to us about all things Blitzbok and rugby in South Africa, particularly in terms of development.